Thank you all so much for joining us for our final conversation in our Excellence in College Counseling series. I'm Stephanie Owens with the Reach Higher team here at the Common App, and I'll let our co-host, our co-moderator, Meredith Lombardi, introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. Meredith Lombardi from Common App.
We are really excited to have all of you guys join us. This has been such a fun way for us to celebrate school counselors, to have school counselors have this moment to talk to each other, to talk about all of the things that are going on in the world today. If you haven't had a chance to take a peek at some of our other conversations that we've had in our series, please do so. We'll make sure that we share the information for how to see the others on our social media, as well as potentially in the chat here. This will also be available later for you all to see and share with your other school counselor colleagues and other educator colleagues. So thank you again for joining us. We're really excited. And thanks to our partners at Collegewise for hosting this with us. It's been a ton of fun as always. So a couple of ground rules for the chat today. We have our friends Noor and Joe from Collegewise who are going to moderate and interact with you in the chat. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. If there is a question that someone asked that you would also like to ask or that you really agree with, you can thumbs up that question. They'll pass that to us so that we can share them with our colleagues. So I'll give a little history about our award and then introduce our panelists, and then we'll jump right in. So we started the Excellence in College and Counseling Award in 2020 in partnership with Collegewise, as I said earlier, to coincide with Reach Higher's partner, the College Football Playoff Foundation. They have an event that they do every year called the Extra Yard for Teachers. And they have been a partner of ours with some of the work that we've done with our College Signing Day events, if you all are familiar with that, and some of our other work as part of Reach Higher. And we wanted to be able to do some things with them to be able to also celebrate school counselors while they're celebrating educators during the College Football Playoff Championship weekend. So we were able to go down to New Orleans in January of 2020, where we were able to meet our very first Excellence in College Counseling recipient, Farah Parker. And this year we were sad that we weren't able to go to Miami in person in the middle of January. But we wanted to make sure that we were choosing a counselor and a counselor team from high schools that are in the geographic region of that championship game. So hopefully next year we'll be able to join folks again in Indiana, which is where the next game will be. But like I said earlier, last year we honored Farah Parker for her work at Kenner Discovery High School in Kenner, Louisiana, which is right outside of New Orleans, home of the Sugar Bowl. And it was so much fun to be with her last year, to see where she was working, to get to meet some students in the New Orleans area and to just celebrate with her in person. And like I said, we had really big plans to celebrate with our counselors this year, but we're excited to be able to do so virtually. But we are recognizing Harry Nerenberg and his team of 5 counselors, all from Miami Palmetto Senior High School. We announced them last month at the start of our series, and we are really happy to have both of them here with us to talk about the work that they've been doing, the work that they can do with other counselors. We want this to be a conversation that is, of course, about our students, but also about how we as counselors can work together with one another, and how folks like Meredith and I can continue to support your work and all that you're doing. I have no doubt that this is going to be an amazing conversation. I just want to give both of them big kudos and big credit for the work that they're doing. I'll say from a personal standpoint, when we set out to look for our honorees for this year, I was anticipating that we would have to I don't want to say lower our standards, but that we might not be able to meet some of the pieces of the categories that we have for looking for counselors, including FAFSA completion data. We just knew that because of everything that was happening this past year, that FAFSA numbers had dropped We just weren't sure what we were going to find. And so it was really, really, really a pleasant surprise, really exciting to see that FAFSA completion actually went up for both schools this year, and that the work is still getting done. So we're hoping to get some of those best practices from both Harry and from Farah. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Meredith for our very first question.
Oh boy. All right. So we'll get this conversation started. You know, Harry and Farah, that I'm very excited about spending this next hour with you. We have a lot of great questions. You all have a lot to offer to the people who are listening today and who will later listen to the recording. So again, just excited. Thank you both for making the time to be here. I'll echo what Stephanie said. Also, if people have questions that they want to ask of Farah and Harry, please make sure that you put those in the Q&A, or if you see someone else's question, to up it so that we can make sure to ask it. So my first question, and I will start with you, Farah, will be, this has been a rough year, an unanticipated year. There have been a lot of ups and downs, but let's start on a positive note. What has been something that you didn't expect that has actually been something positive that's come out of COVID-19?
I would probably say getting help from people that I didn't expect to get help from. And not that parents aren't like a critical part of this entire process, but parents just trying to understanding that like educators right now are probably a bit overwhelmed and things like that. And so the parents here at Kinder Discovery have been extending themselves and trying to help with finding certain resources and making certain things easier when disseminating information to students. And so that has been tremendous, a tremendous help this year, and one that was unexpected because it wasn't anything that I asked for. I just looked up and they were like, oh, by the way, we got this. And I was like, oh, okay.
Harry, did you want to add? What would you add?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that all these years, whenever we go to a meeting, I'd have to drive an hour in traffic to get to a meeting, to meet with the people and collaborate with my fellow coworkers, for counselors. And I found, we always said, why can't we just do this on a webinar? Why can't we just do this way? And because of the access, because of the limitations we've had, to be able to have meetings often and be able to collaborate, collaboration has become so much easier because we are using it through the media that we're using. In that way, I think it's been, tremendous. I think that's probably the most positive thing I can think of, school system wise. In the school itself, I think it had the positives are sometimes hard to come up with, but we are seeing the resilience of the children. And that to me has been totally amazing. I always knew they were tough and they were motivated, and some were unmotivated, but the resilience has just been pretty amazing to see them do this.
I think that's a good segue. What will you do differently when we're, quote unquote, back to normal? And recognizing that I'm not even sure what normal really is anymore. What do you think that new normal will look like for our students and for our schools?
I'll go.
I was waiting for you, actually.
No, different. I'm not really sure that now that some of the way that we've been doing programming has been extended to like doing things like in a virtual platform, I'm not really sure we'll move away from that. It's always been challenging sometimes to meet with families and trying to like really take into account everyone's schedule and things like that. And so by us branching out virtually, I think that once the barrier of like virtual learning won't be so much of a barrier anymore, because it won't be something that has to be done once we are back to normal. I think that will Like we're not going to move away from that virtual platform. That has helped us out tremendously with being able to just get a hold of people that normally we may not be able to reach out to.
Yeah, I think the new normal is going to have a 2.0 for sure. I just think, I think the days of, I think the masks are going to be staying no matter what happens in the situation. I think some kids are going to be, children are going to be different, teachers are going to be a little bit different and a little more hesitant. I think it's just going to become more flexible. I think I would hope so with the larger public schools like I'm in, that this dual modality won't go away 100%. I see it working with a lot of kids and I see it not working with a lot of kids. So I think we have to address the fact that this is not a, you know, the colleges are already doing remote learning and dual modality before this pandemic started. Some of the, you know, they're ranking online schools. So I think high schools have to look at the size of the schools and say, you know, this may work for some of the kids. But again, the stress level for next year, I keep telling the kids, I think they're going to have a more normal year than ever before next year, but I think some things are going to stay the same. So
what are you looking forward to staying the same?
Kids that sometimes don't socially do well in school and they're academically capable to do it, they don't have the distraction if they're home on the computer. I mean, they actually enjoy that part. I always remember there was a young lady last February, one of our top students, who came into my room and said, I am so stressed out. I am so tired of hearing all the stress. And she said, I just want to not see anybody, go home and get my work done, graduate and go off to college. That was in February before all this happened. And I still blame her in many ways for all of this occurring because it's almost like she got her wish. And it's just, I think our children like that just don't want that experience. So some kids want the high school experience and love every minute of it, but not everybody is like that, you know.
There's a meme going around this morning I saw on Twitter where people are trying to figure out who caused all of this, and the tweet starts with someone signed up for TSA pre-check for the first time and at the end of February because she had all these trips planned. So I want you all to know I applied for global entry because I thought I might take a few international trips this past year. So I apologize in advance.
And I'm right there with you. I was supposed to fly with Florida State to go see their campus in Spain. And I got my global pass in February and we were headed to Spain and France, and my global pass is still sitting in the vault.
Yes. Yes. So apologies from all of us for setting this all off. So Farah, how about you?
I wasn't traveling.
No, not that. No, what are the things that you want to see the same?
See the same. I mean, I guess I kind of miss the sounds of students in the hallway. And so I'm looking forward to being able, like, it's nice to be able to like witness your students' accomplishments and it not be like through a screen. And I can't wait to do that for you guys to like really be able to celebrate. So since we're not hugging anymore, you know, just a firm high five would be nice. Like, I can't wait till we can get back to that.
I agree 100%. I have to tell you that in Dade County Public Schools, we are not supposed to hug children. That's the rule. It's the rule. It's one of the only rules I've ever broken throughout my years. And I totally miss that celebration for the kids and the comfort, you know, to meet a child for the first time and create that relationship and not end it with a hug. You know, I don't know if that will ever come back either. But
I think I would really struggle with that, not being able to hug students.
It's horrible. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, because you've kind of touched upon it, but what are some of the changes that you've had to make with your own counseling practices in terms of connecting with students when they're not there? And how has that worked? What hasn't worked? You know, what do you see that you may continue to use in the future?
I said, oh, can I go on this one first?
Mhm.
Zoom is pretty incredible when it really comes to if you have a flexible teaching staff that allows you in their classroom for 5 minutes and popping in. Um, that's been I think a very effective way for me to get into their classes. I'm a popper inner. I go into the classes quickly usually and say something they need to know and run out and go to another class. Um, Doing it on Zoom absolutely is less steps, but it's definitely a great way of doing it. I think having all the evening activities on Zoom may not be as personal, but I think we reach more. Like the best example I went with is I had a financial aid night with University of Miami hosting it with me. 300 and some people came to watch it on YouTube live, and on this live, and it's up to over 650 right now. People are watching it, telling them to go back. I think like my class visits, we can tape them, and they're there. And if a kid misses it because they were at somewhere else, they can come see it. We didn't do those things before. We never thought about being able to make things a little bit more permanent. We talked about, bringing a recorder in and doing it. But I think best practices that we're able to keep things historically there so the kids can go back and review it, or the parents can go back and review it. I also think getting the kids back to email has really, I think we've forced them into email. That's another little piece that, they weren't doing it. They would never look at their email, and they're doing it.
Farah.
I mean, I would probably echo off of what Harry's saying. Like, um, definitely with the best practices and like with financial aid night, yes, being able to do this on this virtual platform has been extremely helpful. You get very like I said, like just reaching parents, like, and that's the reason that really helped me bridge the gap with parent programming, like for me, because like people are always doing a lot and 1,000,005 things, and so when everyone had to slow down, it gave us the opportunity to really like connect more and do things that way. So I'm hoping that that part never goes away, and I definitely love that part.
Harry, we put your bio in the chat so people have a bit of a sense of who you are, but you've been a counselor for over 30 years. And I'm sure that means that you've seen a lot of different things. So how has the profession changed over 30 years, and what would you like to see it do as you're approaching retirement? What would you like to see happen with the profession after you're gone?
It's funny when you started that question, the first thing I thought of were my envelopes that I used to lick when I used to send my Common App things out to the schools. And so I think back to that time when we go to the post office every day for 3-4 weeks, dropping off everything that needed to go out. But I have an English teacher at school, and I won't say her name, she'll be embarrassed. But every year she would say for the last 20 years, this is the worst class I've ever had. They are not motivated. It is the worst case of senioritis I've ever had. I don't think the kids have changed that much in the core. Do they have more distractions? 25 years ago it was cable TV, and now it's everything at your fingertips. I think we're still fighting the same battles, and the kids, but I think the inner core of the kids that are motivated to go to college, it's there, and I don't think that has changed as much as everybody makes it seem. It's like I still don't. I'm at a point where I haven't heard a question that I haven't heard already, and I think the kids, if they're motivated, or even the non-motivated ones, the ones that just know they want to go to college or they want to do something different, they're ready to take that next step forward. And I don't think a lot of that stuff has changed, but our attitude towards as adults, I think we sometimes say it's gotten worse because of internet, because of Twitter, because of TikTok and all the other things, yet they're just the same distractions that we all had 25 years ago. I think if you have a motivated child, you can reach them however you need to reach them. And if you have an unmotivated child, and having worked with at-risk kids, the at-risk kids are just the same. The at-risk behaviors are still the same. Are things just more open because it's public? And I think we'd see a little bit more of it. But it's not that. I don't know. When I saw that question, when you asked that question, it was just like, wow, things really haven't changed that much.
So what I heard from that, Harry, was that kids haven't changed, but moving from paper to electronic has changed for you as a counselor.
Oh,
Go ahead.
all for the better.
Correct.
I
Right.
mean, the idea of being able to have a common application, to be able to, write one, not type every letter out individually to the colleges, and have a common letter for all the colleges, and everything's depersonalized a little bit when it comes to the application process. So I think that part has changed a lot. But the creating that, because of the multitude of applications that have grown, that's something that has changed. Kids are applying to more colleges. Kids are reaching for more financial aid, I think. I think they're hungrier for scholarships. But I think they have the ability, I think there's an ability that to do those things is still the same as it was 25 years ago. But you have made it easier.
When I talk to students today, one of the things that just is so resonates with me is I graduated high school sort of at the dawn of well, not at the dawn of the internet, but the internet, colleges were just really getting on the internet in a way that made sense. You still had to mail in your application, but you might have been able to download the application online. But I applied to 4 colleges, and it was, the reach, the safety, and some stuff in the middle, right? And I remember the thinking behind it was, I was a smart kid. I was good at school. So it's not like I didn't think I was going to get into college. I thought I would totally go to college. But there was this thought that was like, there's no need to apply to a whole bunch of schools because you're really only going to go to one. Which one do you really want to go to? And I hear that in the back of my mind now, but I also think that if I had things like the Common App online and even just Google wasn't around then, that I may have found a place for me that was better for me, for who I was, for my interests, a better fit, someplace completely different, someplace off the beaten path. So, or actually maybe not off the beaten path, but off of my very sort of mid-Atlantic. I didn't want to go too far south. I didn't want to go too far north. I didn't want to go too far west. And I grew up in the DC area, so there wasn't a whole lot east. So you say, oh, you've got this little box that you sort of put yourself in. Whereas now students have so many more options literally at their fingertips. How do you deal with that? I go back and forth about, am I okay with kids applying to 50 schools to see what happens? Or, you're going to get into some of them. Is 50 too much? Or is 25 too much? Or is 10 too much? How do you have those conversations with your students, with your parents, what that means about scholarships? And frankly, my mother was like, we're not going to spend thousands of dollars for you to apply. Application fees aren't cheap, and they've only gotten more expensive since 1999. So how do you have those conversations? What do you say to your parents and your students when that part of the conversation comes up?
Well, okay. Living in Louisiana is fairly unique, though. The students are not like from where I came from. So I am from New Jersey, and I found my way to Louisiana when I came for undergrad in New Orleans at Dillard. But our students, they're very built on the tradition of really like staying home, like close to home. And so they're really not even trying to go farther than like northern Louisiana at times. So for me, most of my students will apply to like the state schools, public and private. And so that part, the conversation becomes slightly difficult when I see a certain something in a student, and I'm like, you would really benefit from this program that is, at GW. And so had you ever considered maybe going to school, up in the Northeast, and like having to find ways to have those types of conversations? That's the way that my conversations have to go, because for the most part, the families are just built on tradition. They're like, oh, okay, I went to LSU, they went to LSU, we're all going to LSU. And so, so the kids are like, oh, okay, great. Well, that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to go to LSU. And I'm like, well, what about, this school? This is in North Carolina. Like, how about that? And then even when having that discussion, I also make sure that I have firm and direct conversations about money too, because part of the reason why they want to stay close by also is because we do have a state incentive that will help to alleviate some of that cost, some of that financial burden on families. And so I understand why they would want to stay local, because there's less of a financial gap. So when I have those discussions about schools that are out of state, I also make sure that I am careful about selecting a school that might be able to meet full need or offer as little to no gap for these families, to bring that comfort so that they at least know that there might be even some assistance in getting the students there, but also keeping them there when they get there. So yeah. There's a lot of things that play into that conversation, but when I have conversations about students going out of state, I got to talk about money too.
So it's funny, I have a slide on my PowerPoint for seniors and juniors. That's the same slide I've used since I've been doing counseling. I think I even stole it from the counselor before me. 3 to 4 schools in state, 4 to 7 to 10 schools out of state. If you're going to go out of state, make sure at least one school on the list is a school that you can afford, you can get into, and you won't cry if it's the only school that accepts you. And I say that every time, I say it every year, sometimes 3-4 times a year. A lot of kids who have prepaid in the state of Florida, and there's bright futures in the state of Florida, which is an enticement to stay in Florida, but they pretty much go with that. They'll apply to a couple of schools they know they can get into, and a couple of schools that are reach. The kids that want to go and leave, if the ability to apply to a lot of schools with one application, if you have a waiver so it's free to not be restricted by the number, they use the shotgun approach. They just keep applying. And this year, that's all pre-COVID, and COVID now with test optional, I mean, it's just opened the floodgates for kids who have great grades, who don't test well. And those kids have opened the door for applications, for a large amount of applications, more than I've ever seen before. I've got quite a few kids over 20. I have one of my kids, she applied to 43 schools and she ended up being a posse winner. So all the applications and all her interest, the passion obviously came out into becoming a posse winner, but it just was pretty impressive. She was just shotgun approach. I'm going to apply to everybody who accepts me. And then I'll choose the one who gives me the best package. That's a little absurd, but the test optional allowed her to do it.
Yeah.
I was going to ask a follow-up question on that, Harry. So at Common App, right, we saw a surge with members going test optional or offering test optional policies this year, over 85% of Common App members. How did you help students navigate test optional? Thinking about requirements in Florida and then thinking about, applying out of state. How do you keep their lists down when test optional is introduced?
Well, let's go back to the state of Florida though. So we were different because in the beginning I was so angry that we were not going test optional in the state of Florida without any kind of reason. I think we were in an uproar because every other state was doing it. And in the end, I don't think it was the worst thing in the world, since tests did become accessible to the children and the colleges are balancing their admissions due to testing. So being test optional, and that it really was very interesting watching the kids with those fantastic grades who didn't test well, watching them make that decision that, oh my God, the world is at my fingertips. I am going to be rewarded because I work hard. And seeing those kids, that light bulb going on where they said, oh my God, it isn't about the test. It is about me, about my essay. I think that door opened, and I think we saw that floodgate open up for those kind of kids. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's where my brain went to afterwards. So.
Well, I think that you're discussing how it had a positive impact on students in terms of how they valued and saw themselves. And in that was a positive takeaway.
They didn't see themselves as a test score.
Right.
But again, when it came to our state schools, I think it was actually a better thing that some of our schools are very holistic, but the idea that so many kids apply to the state schools in Florida, that having that test in the end probably ended up being okay.
How did you handle those conversations with your students? I mean, did you tell some students, hey, you don't have to take the test, so you should apply to X, Y, and Z? Because
Absolutely. Yeah, there's kids who were just spectacular with the community service and their projects and took rigorous classes and did well in their AP testing, but just couldn't master the SAT or the ACT. These kids got what they deserved. I don't know what's going to happen in the end. Will they get what they deserved? But they sure feel like they were able to apply to anywhere where they could get into, where they had the grades to get into, and they had the rigorous schedule. It made it a lot more competitive in our building.
How did that work out? Talk about that.
Yep, my school's really very fortunate. Our kid, when I say competitive, my kids at my school are super. They help each other, they work with each other, they tutor each other, they read each other's applications and essays. I mean, it's sort of scary, but they also are very aware that X amount of kids applied to X amount of college, and should I apply to that school? They play the game, but this child's EDing somewhere, maybe I won't ED there. I want to go and look at something a little bit different. So there a little bit more of the competitiveness came out, but in the end, they still were out there like help. It really does amaze me with my children that they help each other constantly. The peer review is just impressive to watch them do it. Has a lot to do with our teachers too, I think.
Farah, did you find it all this year? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Hard part of not being on a panel in person. Go ahead, Meredith.
No, I was just going to say I didn't know whose turn it was at this point, and I was like going to say I don't know whose turn it is. So cool, you go, Steph.
No, I was just going to say, Farah, did you find that how did your students sort of respond to each other in this time? We've at the beginning of the pandemic, Louisiana, New Orleans, your area was the ground zero where everyone was getting hit hard by this. How did your students come together sort of as the year progressed and everything moved on, both last year with applying to colleges and then this year?
Well, I would say with the class of 2020, there was already like a sense of togetherness. So for them, being apart was like very devastating. And then toward the end, they were able to kind of figure and work that out. With class of 21, what they did was a lot of our students actually don't live far from each other, like they're neighbors. So they kind of potted themselves. And so they had like their own like supports within these pods. And so even with some of them that are hybrid, some of them that are hybrid and things like that, they still operate within that, like so they've created their own small communities, and then that works as their support system. So I thought that was really interesting to see, because sometimes I would notice that I might share information and like these same 3 or 4 students would then start to inquire about something. And then that's how kind of like it traveled. And then I noticed like, oh, okay, so these are your pods. So where we thought we were doing something at our school by creating learning pods, our students already had them in their communities. So.
Farah, did you ever notice that because of those pods, as we call them COVID groups, that one would come in and ask a question, and then the next day the other one would ask for an appointment? All of a sudden, you have, instead of all coming together, they came in individually to ask the question. They're talking, they're discussing.
Right.
You have the same conversation with 4 people.
Right. Sometimes I would even I would request a meeting, or one of them would request a meeting virtually with me. And then all of a sudden, once I log into the meeting, it'd be like 3 people here. And I'm like, how are we doing this? And this is not the way that I normally work. So is this okay? Are you okay with me sharing this information? And they're like, yeah, we want to talk about this. So it's just like, oh, okay, all right, let's do this.
Gen Z is amazing as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's funny you said that because I went into classes about 6 weeks ago, and I went to the classes and said, listen, I'm going to open Zoom during lunch. The couch is open. And so kids would come in and talk, and they would normally come in the office and talk on the couch. So the kids that are home working were able to have that to do. And I imagine as decisions come out, the couch will be open even more.
Oh,
So.
yeah.
I love that. Okay, so there have been a few questions that have come in from the audience and attendees, and I want to make sure that we get to those. So I'm going to just read to you. I don't know if you guys are looking. You don't need to be looking at the Q&A, but Malia asked the question, what is the best way for organization community partners to engage with school counselors right now? Given the current demands, I've experienced some counselors to be overwhelmed and less responsive. How can we as community organizations continue to maintain strong relationships with school counselors for the benefit of students? Farah, do you want to start with that?
I mean, all I could say is be flexible. Like, oh, Christina Fontenot. Actually, Christina, who works with the Cowan Institute, she's been tremendous in actually helping to extend resources to the counselors. So we have been having, of course, she's just one organization, but what I do appreciate is that Christina will send a personal note sometimes, and it'll be something out of the blue. And so with that, just checking in with people because people are overwhelmed. And so that's something that she did toward the beginning of the school year, was just like, hey, everybody, like it wasn't anything about work or about partnering with anything. It was just like, how's everybody doing? Like just doing a quick temperature check. And that was very, very helpful. Because then, you were able to vent a little bit and then get back to the business of what was going on. And people will remember that.
Harry, I'll pose the question to you, the same question, but also in, and this might take us into the next topic. You have discussed how COVID-19 has created additional community partnerships, things that may not have existed in the past. Now people are stepping up within the community. So I guess asking the question, how do you continue those engagements with community organizations, but also what changes have you seen because of the pandemic?
I really quickly want to answer going back a little bit, and I'll answer the next one if I remember it. Okay, so first thing, when you talk about if colleges want to do something to help counselors, stop the spam email that you're sending to everybody else. We do not need 450 Christmas cards, okay, as the time goes in. And if you're going to want a college visit, okay, and we welcome college visits during our lunchtime. We love it. Give us a list of kids that you have showing interest that you would want to have them come, and then we'll advertise to the rest of the people. But make things a little bit. You want to make it easier for us. That's a one way we can, because it is becoming overwhelming as the emails continuously come in. It has it's become overwhelming in some ways. But I really truly mean that. Take a little bit of the, because it is a business in so many ways. Take a little bit of that business out of there, and make it more, as Farah said, make it personal. Okay. Getting back to the collaboration, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have the Miami-Dade Community College and the State University system in Florida, who are offering us, workshops, and we've had more than a few conversations with directors of admissions on a Zoom open to the public. Our local community college has opened up FAFSA workshops, I think almost on a weekly basis, which really takes a lot of the weight off of us. Like I think I said it earlier, the collaboration in our school system, sharing ideas. I've never seen more best practices than I have this year. Again, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but our district does power hours, and for counselors and for CAP advisors, to where we're able to sit and get taught, learn something or teach something that allows us to make everything very, very personal. I would like to see that on the end of from the college representatives and being able to make it a little bit more real. Like when you said that, Farah, it was sort of like picked off a thought that, yeah, the personal touch is nice. And there's some reps are some schools are unbelievably dynamic at it. And other schools just, you know, we're just a mass email. You know, once again, I never know if I answer the question. So.
And every insight you say, Harry, is
Insightful.
insightful.
Well, another question that came from the chat, Harry, you mentioned that your financial aid presentation had over 400 attendees, which is awesome. Can you both share some strategies to increase engagement and attendance at online sessions?
Hire Harry. I've never had 300 plus. I got excited about 80 parents, but my school class is really small. We only had like 120 students in our senior class, and that's like a segment of what, you know, Harry's got going on over there. So 300 is amazing. I want to know, so I'm listening, Harry.
Yeah. You know, I guess it just worked out. You know, first of all, I'm very lucky to work at Miami Palmetto Senior High School. We are a conglomerate of our school is from the very finest neighborhoods in Miami to some of the lowest socioeconomic backgrounds where kids are still motivated and the parents still want the information. Having this online, like I said before, keeping it permanent really does help. And I think using the use of, you know, when at a financial aid night in the auditorium, I'd have 200 or 300 people, which would be, you know, 80, it could be 100 families. I didn't know. But being able to use Zoom and other media to communicate to the kids, I think it's key for all of us. I think we have to step it up and, you know, like I said before, keep this going. Don't let this part of the things we learned through this year, don't let them go away and go back to where we were. I think this is just the best practice that we need to all emulate. You know, even if you're doing a physical school setting, we have the power to put it on the internet. And I think that's just the way to reach the kids. You know.
Harry, you had mentioned these, you know, these power hours, these opportunities where you're connecting with the other counselors and CAP advisors. Do you have other examples of how you are staying connected? I'll start with you, Harry, and then Farah, but how you're staying connected with counselors during this time, whether it's through your district or outside of your district. And then just as a follow-up, thinking about that piece of your own development, but then you're also just personal well-being, right? And I know we've kind of talked about this a little in the past, but just how you're taking care of yourself.
So you want me to go first on that one, right? Okay. So I'm really fortunate. The Collegewise program in Miami-Dade County Public Schools had its high moments years ago. We had a little bit of drop when budgets came, but we're now back full force with leadership that's just been fantastic. And these power hours, and with the one thing we've all had is a great way of sharing. I don't know if I would have made it in this job if it weren't for certain other college advisors in the district who share everything they have. It's not so important that the school down the street get the scholarship as long as it's open to everybody else. We have this mentality, and it's been that way from years ago, that we do take care of each other in so many ways. We have CAP advisors that mentor other young CAP advisors as new ones come in every year. I don't think you can ask for more support than we get. And it wasn't always that way. We've had lulls in that. So I think that to me has been like the biggest thing. It's been a gift. It's been a super gift having my fellow workers in the district share stuff and actually things from Broward will come down and other areas. It's overwhelming at times when I don't have to look for something because I know somebody's going to remind me to do it. And where'd that second part of the question go? I don't know. So it's great being this age because you can make excuses for anything.
I'm gonna pass it to Farah just in terms of the connecting with counselors, but then you too, Farah, can talk about well-being. That was part two of the question: is your own personal well-being the well-being of other counselors and extended to your school community?
So again, I'm gonna give a shout out to Christina Fontenot from the Cowan Institute, because she and Sheena Reed have done an amazing job with keeping college counselors connected, and keeping us well informed. Um, we meet about once a month, um, and we're able to, offer best practices and also do some check-ins. Um, it's very helpful, especially when it's coming up like on certain times. So like right before the applications really start rolling in, as far as students looking for recommendations and things like that, we were able to do a session just to offer some best practices on how to stay out in front of that, and like what things you could offer to students anytime there was any updates, especially like last year when everything shut down. Cowan Institute was very instrumental in making sure, well, Cowan Institute and Accept and a few other organizations were very instrumental in getting information out of, as far as like deadlines that had changed, deposits being waived, and just like getting information out to college counselors, because no one had ever seen, something like this happen before. So that was huge, 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 and has been a tremendous help to the overall success of the end of last school year and even this school year. Those resources have been very helpful. Um, and I guess that's also been helpful with the well-being of other counselors. I mean, I joined some Facebook groups so that we were able to share some of those resources with each other. And then it's just fun to see some of like the funny things that we, say to each other to help keep each other motivated and things like that. Um, I've made some friends with some soon to be retirees uh, on these Facebook groups as well. And they've been extremely helpful because they've done this for so long. So it's just that part has been rewarding and helpful. So as far as well-being, that's my outlet.
We have two questions from the chat that are about testing. So the first is, how would you advise juniors taking the SAT or ACT? Do you think that test optional will continue? And sort of alongside that, how do you all think we can best prepare our current underclassmen for the shift that we're seeing in admissions practices as a result of COVID?
I'm worried about our juniors. I really am. There are a group of kids that are, and you have three groups of kids when you talk about a class. I guess you have the excelling students who are out there finding a way to take the test and getting there. Then you have the middle kids who are smart enough to take care of business, but they're not motivating yet. And then the ones I really worry about are the lower kids who have the ability to do it, but they're just not. They need to be pushed, and I just worry about how we push them. I think it's the junior class is the one that we worried about last year's class because they didn't get to graduate. We worry about this year's class, but they're pretty much relegated to the fact it is what it is. But God willing, that with the COVID does slowly dissipate and we go back to some normalcy, they're going to have to jump back in the game again. And it's going to be very interesting to watch. They're going to be nurtured, and I think that also has to do with our staff and our counselors. I think jumping back in the game is going to be huge, especially if we go back to the same kind of intensity. And if we go back into a normal world next year, and all the schools are test optional, it's going to be very interesting of what's actually going to occur, and how intense it really gets for the candidates, for the colleges. For letters of recommendation for kids who've been online for a whole year. There's going to be, some real question marks about how applications are going to look.
I've been telling my students that we still need to stay in the practice of getting prepared for the test. I know that test optional may or may not be around forever. And so I still want them to be prepared for anything, especially since I know that majority of my students do attend school in state. And I know that the ACT is something that's used to qualify them for our state incentive award. And so for me, that conversation is that you have to still prepare yourself, because in the end, even if it doesn't matter for admissions, it may matter for what the state grant. So if our local agency that operates our state grant said that that was going to be test optional, then that would be a different conversation. But until that requirement goes away, the conversation about being prepared for the ACT still remains the same.
So you both have kind of talked about this, does test optional stay? Does it, what changes in the future? I'm thinking about future and just the college admissions process. And some people may have been following that Common App's been doing this, evolving the app work to make the application more accessible. I'm wondering how you all see the admission process evolving, and do you have dreams of what it could look like? Or, if you could make one change to the process, this is what I would change. Or you could have you can't give me your laundry list, Harry, but just a few things. And I'll start with you, Harry.
Right.
What changes would you like to see?
Okay, can I give a shout out to a school? Because I'm going to just tell you what just happened last week, and this is the way I would love to see the world. Okay, so Florida State did a workshop on their admission process, gave any counselor wanted to come, the statistics on how everything was reached, the difference in testing, the changes, total transparency, showed us how they analyzed a transcript. The next day, decisions came out. The next day, their admission decisions were published on Slate. As a college counselor, I was able to prepare. I was knowledgeable. It was a very popular school in my building. I was able to see how they analyzed the transcript, how they analyzed the application, and I got the results in 24 hours, so that when the kids were either accepted or rejected or whatever, I was able to counsel kids that were in need. I know that that's a dream. I mean, it's being totally transparent. And I don't think everybody's willing to do that. I think you want us to be effective in guiding children. That's an effective way of us being able to guide a child. And I think that transparency is needed. I mean, we have other state schools that are very transparent, but that best practice was really I felt very confident that day when the decisions came out. And so if I want to dream, I want that for all the schools, instead of trying to predict.
Ditto. Yeah, that would be extremely helpful. Extremely helpful.
And there are other schools who do that. I mean, there are other schools that do similar things. They communicate to the schools. They give you a list within a couple of days. Or, they'll email it to you. They'll snail mail it to you. But on a consistent basis, I think as we go through this next transition from pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID, I think a little bit of that transparency, a little bit of that business part of the application of the admission decision process needs to become a little bit more transparent for all of us, so we can all do better for the kids and the teachers and the staff.
Agreed. I second that motion.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left. So if anyone has a burning question in the audience, please put it in the chat. But until then, I'll sort of end with something that a colleague of mine and I do on a podcast that we hope will have. We have a moment of hope at the end of every episode. I know I didn't prep you all for this, but is there something right now that is making you all hopeful for your students this year, for counselors in particular, for yourselves, for the world?
Yeah, you should have prepared us.
Sorry.
No, okay. Do me a favor. Ask that question. I do this with kids all the time. Ask that question again.
Okay. Is there something right now either in your school or in the profession or just in the world at large, that is making you hopeful? I'll say that this conversation is making me extremely hopeful. I can admit that I've been having a rough week in the office, outside of the office, and knowing that the kids are all right is helpful for me, even knowing that they're not all right, but knowing that they're okay, and that what you all are seeing on the ground is that they're going to be okay through all of the crazy that's happening in the world, is making me hopeful. And it also gives me sort of direction in my work to what we need to do. Is there something that's doing that for you all?
Okay, now I get it. Okay. So it's funny you've got Miami and New Orleans in the room. Okay, so Katrina happened to New Orleans and Hurricane Andrew happened to Miami. And for the year or two after those storms, we had every service you ever needed. Kids were not hungry. People were moving forward. It was the services were there. And I have found that through this COVID, the same thing is happening. Even though there are people hurting and, with all of the deaths and all of the tragedies that are occurring, that there are services that are being made available to counselors in the schools, to the communities. I would like that to continue. I would like that to be able to, with this, we learn from these kind of tragedies. And I think having that kind of situation where we're able to help people and have the ability to help people, and I think that's a key. But this has been a hurricane.
I would say what's making me hopeful, well, the services, seeing the extended services is definitely something that's extremely helpful. But in, I guess to piggyback off of something you said, Stephanie, with like the kids are going to be all right. It's extremely hopeful to see that children can be so resilient. I know that people say that, someone like just like kind of let that roll off their tongue. Oh, they're so resilient. But like to really see it, like completely defying all types of odds and like still being able to do some of these things and then doing it extremely well. Like, oh, okay, yeah. Because that was one of the things. It's like, what is this going to look like? Because since high school is not looking like what it's looked like for however long, like that was something that I was really worried about. I was like, here we go again. This is another round of all of this. We're in this a whole year. What is this going to look like? And to see some of our students really just pushing through it and coming out of it and just being like, oh, okay, well, it's happening. So, okay, like, all right, that works for me. And so it makes it a little bit easier to do what I do every day.
And Farah, to add that, not just the kids too, the teachers, the counselors,
Yes.
they're all like, most people are stepping up.
Yeah.
Teachers are writing, counselors and teachers are writing letters of recommendation when they got sick people at home or incidents going on in their families, and they're getting their job done. I know my department has just like been amazing at, keeping it going. And
Yeah.
I think that's not a Miami Palmetto thing. That is that's a nationwide thing going on. I think counselors around the world, around our country, have stepped up a notch and are just doing so much more than they've ever done before. And the appreciation that they get from the families and from the kids, I think this year probably will be the year of the most appreciation ever.
Definitely. I agree.
Well, Harry and Farah, it's probably shocking to know that we have hit our full hour and we have run out of time to continue this conversation. I know it has been a joy for me. I could just sit here and listen to you guys talk for hours. We are so appreciative that you were able again to join us. We're thankful for the work that you do every day, working with students and families. I know that there's lots of chatter going on in the chat, but thank you for being you. Thank you. And Harry, please pass along a thank you as well to the counselors at Miami Palmetto. And stay safe. And please, let's continue this conversation. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We will be sharing a recording in the next few days. And please stay safe and healthy, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.